They called him Shadow, a name whispered with a mix of pity and fear at the local auction. He was a magnificent creature, a stallion with a coat the color of a midnight storm, but his spirit was shattered. Scars crisscrossed his flank, a testament to a cruel past, and his eyes held a wild, untamable fire. "He's broken," the auctioneer had declared, his voice flat. "Untrainable. Dangerous." Every seasoned rancher, every hopeful rider turned away. Everyone, except for Mark. Mark saw something else in those haunted eyes. Not malice, but profound pain. Against the advice of everyone he knew, he bought the horse for a price that was little more than an insult. The first few weeks were a living nightmare. Shadow would rear and kick at the slightest touch. He refused to be saddled, refused to be led. He stood alone in the farthest corner of the pasture, a solitary king in a kingdom of loneliness and despair. Mark's friends shook their heads. "You've wasted your money," they said. "That horse is a lost cause." Mark felt a familiar sting of hopelessness creeping in. Maybe they were right. But then, the sky turned a bruised, sickly yellow. The wind began to howl, a mournful cry that ripped through the valley. A storm, more violent than any they had seen in years, descended upon the ranch. Trees bent and snapped, and rain fell in blinding sheets. In the midst of the chaos, a heart-stopping realization struck Mark like a bolt of lightning. His 7-year-old daughter Lily wasn't in the house. She had been playing near the woods, her favorite red jacket a tiny speck of color against the vast green. Now she was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He screamed her name until his throat was raw, but the wind stole the sound and flung it into the roaring tempest. He was about to run blindly into the woods when a deafening whinny cut through the storm. It was Shadow, but something was different. The horse wasn't rearing in fear or anger. He stood at the pasture gate, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the dark, treacherous woods. He slammed his powerful body against the gate again and again, his gaze locked on Mark with an unnerving intelligence. It was as if he was saying, "Hurry! There's no time." Without a second thought, Mark flung the gate open. He had never been able to ride Shadow, but now the horse stood perfectly still, allowing him to leap onto his bare back. It was a silent agreement, a pact made in the heart of desperation. Shadow didn't need reins or commands. He plunged into the woods, his hooves sure-footed on the muddy, treacherous ground, navigating the fallen branches and raging streams with a purpose that defied all logic. He was no longer a broken animal. He was a force of nature, driven by an instinct that transcended fear. The wind whipped at them, and the cold rain felt like needles on Mark's skin. Deeper and deeper they went, far beyond where Mark would have dared to venture alone. Just as a flicker of despair began to extinguish his hope, Shadow came to an abrupt halt. He lowered his head and let out a soft, gentle nicker. There, at the bottom of a small ravine, half hidden by a fallen log, was a small splash of red. It was Lily. She had slipped and fallen, her leg twisted at an unnatural angle, and she was pale and shivering from the cold. Tears streaming down his face, Mark slid off Shadow's back and scrambled down to his daughter. She was alive. He wrapped her in his coat, his heart a chaotic drum of terror and overwhelming relief. He looked up at the horse, standing sentinel on the edge of the ravine, his dark form a silhouette of courage against the raging storm. The broken, dangerous animal had not led him to more danger. He had led him to salvation. He had led him to his entire world. Back at the ranch, with Lily safe and warm, the storm finally subsided. The vet confirmed her leg was broken, but she would be okay. As the sun began to peek through the clouds, Mark walked out to the pasture. Shadow wasn't in the far corner anymore. He was standing by the fence, waiting. For the first time, when Mark reached out his hand, the horse didn't flinch. He leaned forward and rested his massive head against Mark's chest. The wildfire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a soft, steady glow of trust. He was no longer broken. He was a hero. Sometimes, the most broken souls are the ones who know best how to mend a shattered world.